All right, everyone. Good morning. Happy first day of December. Here we are, last month in the year, in the holiday season. What an exciting time! Thank you to everyone who jumped on today and joined us. Welcome to our webinar. Today we have a really interesting topic, a hot topic, one that we're having a lot of conversations about right now, all around the illusion of cloud. Don't be a statistic. Before we jump into it, just a couple of reminders. Everyone, you are on mute and your video is off. But if you'd like to ask a question, just use the chat feature to our panelists and we'll get all of your questions answered. Also, this webinar is being recorded. So we'll be sending it out after the webinar is over today, so you can have it to revisit. And also will be posted on our YouTube channel where you can see this and all of our other content that we've produced. To get started, I'd like to first introduce you to our panelists. We have Matt Briggs with us, who is our Director of New Business Development and Channel Sales. And he's joined today by James Melchor, who is the CTO of DYOPATH. Now with that, Matt, I will hand it over to you.
Great. Good morning. Good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. Thanks for joining James and I for another webinar session. So, James, I do believe this is the first one, at least I've done personally, on cloud this year. I feel like I've been stuck in the mud with cybersecurity, so I'm excited to dig in. And certainly excited to get your feedback on the topic of cloud as well as we move through this. So as Bethany has mentioned, please, as always, ask questions along the way, and we'll do our best to answer them either during the session or at the end. And if we can't for whatever reason, then we'll send out an email addressing the questions after the fact. So. Our title of the webinar suggests we at DYOPATH want you to move to the cloud in a successful, orderly fashion that's cost effective, and I'd say purposeful as well, right? So it's driven by business or organizational requirements, and candidly, that isn't always the case. It sounds pretty straightforward, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then, I would say if the proper assessing, planning, migration strategy, testing, ongoing optimization and support occurs, then cloud computing can quickly allow technology to become, very effective in supporting an organization's goals and objectives. However, there's a flip side to it as well. We've had to help plenty of organizations recover from botched or shaky efforts of migrating to the cloud. And James, Bethany, and I certainly don't want you to fall into that particular category. So in our agenda today, we'll provide you with a very brief overview of DYOPATH. For those of you that are unfamiliar or need to get refamiliar, we'll certainly discuss our webinar objectives, what we're trying to accomplish, and then we'll dig into the meat of the presentation, which is really, let's define cloud a little bit from our perspective, from our partners' perspectives. Why migrate? How to move successfully? What does that playbook look like? Ongoing considerations. Certainly weave in cybersecurity into the discussion because I can't help myself. And then, maybe some common missteps when we talk about value, and then round it out with a use case, if that sounds like a plan. So, DYOPATH, and I promise I'll be brief here. We've been in the IT outsourcing business for quite a while now, since 1996. Co-headquartered in the Chicagoland area in Houston. I think as most of you know, we have offices and service centers scattered across the US, and then also in Latin America and in the UK as well. So we're probably close to approaching 700 employees. So we have some advantages of scale, yet maintain a high touch approach with our clients. and we have a whole host of technical resources, on our staff, around 170 in our various service centers for service desk, NOC, security operations center, and many technical resources that are in the field supporting our valued clients. We'll talk about compliance and regulation a little bit, but please note that we are ITIL aligned. We're going through SOC 2 Type 2 at the moment, in that auditing process. So operational controls and aligning to frameworks is very important to us. So it's worth mentioning. And then I think you guys have probably heard from us in the past that we do a fair amount of work in the federal government space. So, having, clearance with the U.S. government is necessary, but our private sector clients leverage off of that as we've gone through authority to operate audits or ATOs. And then just, very briefly on the security front, because, I would say security permeates, everything that happens in IT. We've been in the advanced security services space for 19 years. So one more here than it says on that slide. We support both unregulated and highly regulated clients. So, we kind of straddle the fence and understand both sides. But publicly traded companies, defense industry base, healthcare, financial, energy sector, so on and so forth. We've done some very unique things with agencies like the FBI, Homeland Security, and Health and Human Services. We were fortunate enough to win a bid to write the book on the NERC SIP framework that's leveraged in the energy sector. And back to the framework discussion, NIST cybersecurity framework, MITRE attack framework, SOAR, things of that nature are weaving into certainly service delivery and workflow for us. James, anything to add so far, or should I keep forging ahead?
No, I'd keep forging ahead, Matt.
All right. And then, also, for those of you that don't know, DYOPATH has a comprehensive suite of services. So our 7 pillars are advanced security, connectivity, education, IT outsourcing, managed services, professional services, and certainly cloud services. And from that perspective, we can provide consulting and advisory services, so cloud readiness, cloud migration, cloud optimization and rationalization and tuning, security that encompasses any of your cloud computing based assets, systems, servers, applications. We have our own private cloud that's located in 5 different geographic locations, and are experts in regard to public hyperscalers like AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud Platform, to name a few. So, as far as the objectives of today, we want to take a step back and do a little bit of education. We're not going to get too far down that rabbit hole, but I thought it would be helpful to define cloud, at least from our standpoint, explain our methodology in both migrating and then maintaining the cloud environment, identify some gotchas, ultimately set you up to embrace the advantages of the cloud. And one of our mantras is cloud done right. So you may have heard that through our account management and pre-sales engineering team in the past. So if you look at our client engagement model, there's a lot of similarities in our value proposition and the advantages that come with migrating to the cloud and leveraging cloud service providers, right? So DYOPATH has been, built, right, to provide services and solutions over 25 years. to take the tactical, the day-to-day, mundane IT tasks off of your plate so that you can focus on higher value objectives. So things like end user support, network monitoring and management, vendor management and triage, security operations, maybe specialized IT projects. So we were built for that. So the same can be said for cloud service providers like us and those that we partner with that are offering infrastructure, platform, or software as a service to deliver cloud computing. So CSPs have built their offering so that you don't have to or you don't need to be in that business anymore. And James, please feel free to chime in at any time if you'd like. So as far as a definition of cloud computing, so I really like Microsoft's definition, which is at the top. So cloud computing is a delivery of computing services, server storage, database, network, intelligence, software, so on and so forth, over the internet to offer faster innovation, flexible resources, and certainly economies of scale. So I think that's a pretty elegant way to define cloud computing. And I thought it was streamlined when I was doing a little bit of research, putting some of these things together. If you look at NIST's diagram of the cloud, I think the picture becomes even clearer, right? So if you look at the various deployment models, and I think these are all familiar to you, but an organization can have their own dedicated cloud environment, right? So nothing is shared. It's all dedicated to a single entity. So that's really private cloud in a nutshell. An organization can also elect a community cloud. So essentially, that's a collaborative effort whereby infrastructure is shared between several organizations with common concerns. So I think of it more as a co-op, right, in a traditional sense. So shared, not quite as shared as the public cloud option, public hyperscalers. And so there is certainly an option to move to public cloud where compute, database, storage, infrastructure is all shared. And then more often than not, there's this hybrid approach, right? So entities have on-prem, they have a little bit of public, maybe a little bit of private, communities, I'd say more of an outlier. And then if you look at the delivery models in particular, we're going to get into this in detail, but I'm sure you guys have seen this. Really, there's 3 different delivery models. So there's IaaS, infrastructure as a service, there's platform as a service, and then there's software as a service, and then there's essential characteristics. We're going to talk more about the benefits derived from moving to the cloud, but the on-demand component, that it's self-serve. Certainly, it has the capability to be elastic, to flex and contract as you need it to. Measure metered service, ubiquitous network access, and then resource pooling that is location independent. And so here's a little. James, go ahead. Do you have something?
Yeah, I do on that last slide, and it's probably a good segue into the slide you were just about to show. So I mean, basically, at the end of the day, when I look at cloud computing, really when you start to look at the infrastructure platform and SaaS, really the concept behind it is really load sharing, right? Compute load sharing. So from where it started was, I can marry all of this compute power together because majority of the time we're never using all the CPU or never using all the RAM of the devices that we were purchasing. We were thinking that, you just have to purchase a server for every application and you had this one-to-one mapping. So in reality, what cloud computing really was is the epiphany to say let's just put all of those resources together, and then we're going to build software layers above that, really, and just use the hardware as a tool. So platform as a service is giving you that development platform to pull resources and capacity from infrastructure. And then software as a service is think of it as the overall, the overall outcome, where it's really you're consuming a software, an application that's no longer, hosted by you. It's hosted, in a cloud provider platform, and you're really just consuming the application, not the development platform that's actually behind it. So that's kind of I like to say, the simplistic way of looking at what really cloud computing is and how it can benefit you. And I think when you look at it from that perspective, you can start to say, okay, I could see what fits for me and my organization as well.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for that, James. I think it's spot on. And so, here's a few examples, right, of infrastructure as a service versus platform as a service versus software as a service, all cloud computing delivery models. On the IaaS side, I think everyone's very familiar with, organizations like Amazon Web Services, certainly Microsoft Azure, and there's a debate whether Azure is IaaS or platform as a service. We'll just say, Azure's IaaS for the time being. And there's other organizations, Rackspace, some big players that have, gotten involved. Google certainly is there. So, think migrating, workloads, VMs to a provider such as AWS, so that you don't have to worry about, server hardware, possibly, OS and things of that nature. And then if we move to the right, platform as a service, the example I like here is force.com, right? So, Force is, really a product to simplify development and deployment of cloud-based applications. And I imagine most are familiar, but Salesforce is built on force.com, right? Force.com is the platform that essentially makes, Salesforce go. And then, software as a service, these are applications that you guys interact with on a daily basis. I know I'm kind of preaching the choir here, but, Office 365, Salesforce, GoToMeeting, WebEx. So just so that we're clear on examples of how this lines up to the various delivery models. So there's a multitude of reasons why moving to the cloud computing model makes sense for organizations. And honestly, it's never one size fits all. There isn't a magic bullet. So here are a few of them that jump out at us. So mobility, and over the last 20 months due to the pandemic, but I think due to organizations just digitally transforming in general, this whole work from anywhere, work from home model has driven this. So server systems, applications are centralized in an environment to support reliably many users from any device, anywhere there is a half decent internet connection, right? So we've seen acceleration to cloud computing, so cloud first, cloud only, due to a very mobile workforce here in the U.S. and in other parts of the world. Compliance is also driving, migration, right? So many of your clients or partners, insurance providers, for example, will want you to check a compliance box, right? Things like SOC 2, ISO, if you're in healthcare, HIPAA, if you're in retail, or if you do any type of credit card transactions, PCI, if you're in the defense industry base, FedRAMP might be important. So a way to accelerate aligning to frameworks and becoming compliant is, you move to a cloud service provider. that already ticks those boxes off. Like I said, elasticity, right, and on-demand capabilities are very compelling for organizations, and there's different use cases. It could be an organization that's heavy into application development, and they need, test environments. They need development environments, and they, even need the production environment to go along with that. It could be, organizations that have cyclical or seasonal demand and, seasonal workforce. So there's a lot of advantages that are inherent to cloud, just with the whole elasticity piece. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, so if I could add to that, very similar to the last slide that Matt showed, when clients ask me or present a problem, and they're like, well, we want to go to the cloud, and my question is, what are you really trying to achieve, right? So when I look at IaaS, I look at the platform as a service and software as a service. They're really, there's reasons, right? So are you trying to get out of the aging infrastructure that you're currently in, but you don't really have a development platform, and there's not a consumption of an app that you can replace the platform that you're trying to get off of? Then an infrastructure as a service move might make more sense, right? If there is a regulatory compliance need where it's really the cost for you to secure what you need to secure will cost way more for you to build it in-house and then hire staff to maintain it. That is another reason to look at infrastructure as a service and say, well, I want to move this platform into this entity or into this cloud provider to check these boxes, like Matt said, around compliance, right? And then when you're looking at the development piece, so if you are like say a retailer and you have a really big development platform and you're trying to scale it on your own and you're trying to buy the hardware and do all those type of things, when it makes more sense to say, I want to lift and shift this into AWS, or I want to move over into Azure and take advantage of that platform, right? For the elasticity perspective, but also from a kind of I would say, speed to production. So it also gives you the ability to utilize that platform, scale up really quick, versus you having to build, right? And then the SaaS is really, should I consume this? Should I consume this versus trying to do development or maintain my own infrastructure, right, in a cloud provider? So it's really just the three. In my mind, it's just kind of looking at it from those three perspectives and saying what fits, where are my requirements driving me? And I think that's why it was such an easy shift for people to say, well, I'm going to get off of on-premise Exchange and now move to Office 365. You're buying a software as a service, right? You're buying a platform. You're just subscribing to it, and then you're not worrying about maintenance and other things that fall into that. Now there is some governance components to that, but all in all, that's kind of the same way that's the way I like to look at it when clients are asking me about why should I move to the cloud.
Yeah, love it. And then I said I talk a little bit about security because I can't help myself. And we'll talk about being careful of getting lulled into a false sense of security, no pun intended, in regard to cloud and cloud computing. But there are some immediate advantages, right, from a physical security perspective, and then certainly a cyber standpoint as well. And then James hit on Microsoft 365. Sometimes application providers give you no other option, and you've got to go regardless, and in some cases kicking and screaming. And so something else to certainly consider and plan for. All right. So let's talk about, it's really a few steps in the process of migrating to the cloud. And we want to call out that going through a formal cloud readiness assessment, I mean, whether that's an internal or you leverage a third party like DYOPATH to help assess and build a game plan, that should be part of the process, right? And so we've got our our STSP process, which we dig into business information model, which feeds into the technical information model, the underlying infrastructure, which cloud would be a part of, and then ultimately that ties into what support is going to need to look like on a day-to-day basis. But the long and the short of it, James mentioned it, let's have a discussion with the appropriate folks in the appropriate functional areas about organizational requirements. Let's start there. And then everything else really falls into place, right? We want to determine what needs to stay on-prem, what can be migrated to the cloud. We can make a decision on IaaS, platform as a service, or software as a service. Is the right approach public, private, or hybrid? And then I think this is often overlooked, is rationalizing and optimizing prior to the move, because we see a lot of lift and shift, and that creates sort of garbage in, garbage out, and that's when you get into real problems with cost overruns. And then we don't want to forget that I know you guys are good at vetting potential partners, but really digging in with the various CSPs that are out there and making sure they're aligned with your organization where they're going. So James, any additional thoughts here?
Yeah, on the cloud service provider vetting, I mean, really, and really all of these, I mean, from my standpoint, it's requirements have to drive the reason, why you're going to a certain cloud or cloud provider. I don't think you should let just, I'm going to say, not just technology. A lot of people say, oh, you need to go to Azure or you need to go to AWS. And in some instances, you actually could go to private Azure and AWS based on what you're trying to accomplish. And just to give you kind of an example of that, is when you look at AWS and you want to subscribe to their DNS platform, which is better, I would say, than Azure's and some other providers that are out there. So you're taking a component of one, and then you start looking at, well, Azure might have a better IaaS platform for my use case, so you want to go to that. But then you're also saying, well, there's a certain amount of data that I still want to control that might flag a compliance item where I want to keep this in-house or in a private cloud, right? And then push to Azure or AWS. So I would just say, you have to really look at, a part of this is not just being, having a cloud service provider just stick you in one type of cloud. It's really looking at the overall requirements and what you're trying to achieve versus, a one size fits all type approach.
Right. And we mentioned support earlier, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later, but we've seen organizations go hell for leather into the cloud, and they went whole hog with AWS, migrated, and then said, oh, we really don't have any internal staff that has experience there, and now we've got to support this, and the support is not as straightforward as maybe we thought it would be. And are we truly optimizing the environment? Because each CSP has their nuances, right, for you to extract maximum value. So
and to your point there, requirements are extremely critical. When you look at IaaS, I think that's pretty straightforward. And then when you look at software as a service, I think it's pretty straightforward. But when you look at your platform as a service, and you're looking at the core development platform that you're going to be utilizing and exchanging data across, and what it all connects to, and the automations that are built, that's where going all in on one is you really have to understand what your core requirements are, because that's where you look at data portability or just overall automation portability. it's not easy to just port from AWS to Azure to Google from a platform as a service perspective, right? They do things differently. So that's, again, why I'm saying, organizational requirements and what you're trying to achieve really is critical. In some instances, it's a straight rebuild, right? So just, again, just as a caution, why, just outline why requirements are so critical.
Yeah. And then, so the migration itself, don't try to go it alone if this is an initiative your internal team doesn't have experience with. So it's okay to hold your hand up and say, hey, it's better to outsource this to a third party that has process, methodologies, plans, people, tools, and experience on a weekly, monthly basis. So, certainly consider that. We have seen some train wreck of migration projects happen because, and there just hasn't been adequate experience or planning, right? And that's not a slam on anyone, but it does happen. And I would say, test, dip your toe in too, do a proof of concept, test a handful of users, test an application out to make sure that it works. Then, migrate on a larger scale and certainly have a rollback plan if things aren't working out, right, for one reason or another. So I mean, I think all kind of common sense stuff, but still important to note. James, anything on the migration piece?
No, I think
Okay.
you covered it there.
Yeah, and then as far as optimization and support, so continue to rationalize and optimize. Use consultants, use tools. Get folks trained up internally. Certainly, monitor and manage. Things like the utilization, right? I mean, how are we consuming the data? Is it time to deploy maybe a direct connection into one of the cloud providers, right? To reduce cost, the administration, and then lastly, strategic alignment and tuning. So go through a review process and make sure that the CSP that you move to is aligned with where the organization is going. And so we've hit on a lot of these things, and we use the wheel in security, and always say security is a journey, not a destination. And the same can be said for your cloud strategy, right? So assess, pilot, put together the plan, migrate, leverage the cloud to the fullest extent you can, and then monitor and optimize and start all over again. And I mean, the lead times that they have here are it's for illustrative purposes, but I think this is an interesting diagram.
So Matt, I'd like to add to that one, if you don't mind going back. So, I mean, the way I like to look at it is when somebody's looking to go to the cloud, really it gives them the ability to pivot pretty significantly within the organization, right? So there's a lot of people are like, well, I'm just consuming email a different way, and in reality, by going to a lot of the different cloud platforms, if it's SaaS or infrastructure as a service or PaaS or whatever, there's a lot of integrations that people don't necessarily kind of pay attention to, or sometimes they do. So really, when you're looking at assessing going to the cloud, it shouldn't just be from a one-to-one mapping, like the rationalization component and optimization pieces. It gives you the ability to say, what do I need within my organization and what don't I need anymore within my organization? What should I rebuild and what should I not? What if I had it to do over again, how should it look, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it gives you the ability to do that, but then also it also gives you the ability to say what should be talking to what to further improve efficiencies within my organization. So in some instances, when you move to certain products to cloud, the data that you need to pull from maybe financial systems, ITS systems, project management systems, all those type of things those are things to also keep in mind and consideration, because those are automations that actually help the organization run better. So it shouldn't just be looked at as, oh, I'm moving to the cloud just for technical reasons. It should really be looked at as, I'm moving to the cloud for strategic reasons, which would help my business run more efficiently in a better way. But also, you're hoping to cut costs and drive efficiency. So, there might be some labor reduction cost type things in there where you can focus individuals on more of the strategic side of the business as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, James. And then, I think, pivoting to, securing your cloud environment. I mean, I love this table, and, it came from website, but, there's, seen it before in other areas, and the on-prem side, the column is really just for reference, right? So you've got physical, you've got the infrastructure, you've got hypervisor, network, OS, apps, the data itself, and then who can access everything. And if you look at IaaS, platform as a service, and software as a service, as you move to the right, you have to consider less elements of security. Still need to take them seriously, but if you think of a software as a service, a Salesforce that you're leveraging for CRM, customer relationship management, you're really worried about who can access the application, and then the data, right? Securing the data. Really, everything else is covered by a Salesforce or that software as a service provider. And then, as you move down platform, you certainly want to secure the application. So Salesforce would want to do that on force.com. And then, infrastructure, there's also the operating system and network piece to consider as well, as far as security. So James, any additional feedback here?
Yeah, so when you look at software as a service, I like to look at it as, what are the items that are going to fall within my realm or my organization's realm to secure. So when you look at a software as a service, I'm thinking, okay, now identity management, right, and my data. So those are kind of the two things. So like SSO, I have to ensure I have SSO or I have multi-factor authentication in place for that app. Outside of that, some of those things fall in the realm of the provider.
James, keep going. I skipped ahead
Yeah.
because the extending the security of the cloud.
Oh,
You're
got
on
it.
a theme. So keep
Okay.
going.
Yeah. So when you start looking and kind of, I would say, the progression on the previous slide was on-premise all the way to consuming it from an app perspective, right? So from left to right, from left, you have more items that you're having to control and govern and watch the handshakes between, the platforms, right, all the way to a SaaS app. So, like I said, MFA or SSO, and maybe some of the data protection and things like that, right? Those things are in place. And as you step down into like platform as a service, well, now more of the data, more of the identity, more of those type of things fall under your control, the development, the code, the quality of the code, code review, those type of things from a security fall back onto your plate, right? Versus a SaaS provider. And then as you drop into infrastructure as a service, the underlying base for that is handled by usually the CSP, but the core components that you still control, like the VMOS and other things like that, those things fall under your control on top of the items that were already stated for, platform and software as a service. Just, a couple of the things that, you have to make sure you understand is You know, you still have to secure the VMs, you still have to secure the apps, you still have to have MFA, you still have to have SSO, depending on how much SaaS apps you're using. Cloud security access or cloud access security broker could come into play for data, really controlling your data, what can go in and out of your environment, EDR at the endpoints. So really, you start to, as you can see, you really are starting to say, okay, I have to control these things and look at things from this perspective. That's another reason I like to say it all ties back to the requirements. If I go to this type of cloud, what do I still need to secure, maintain, support, administer? And that changes based on the platforms that you choose. And then the platforms also that have certain compliance requirements or regulatory compliance associated with them or controls applied to them as well. So.
Yeah, and I think the point here is take a conservative approach. Don't assume, and really understand those roles and responsibilities and lines of delineation on what you should be doing versus what the cloud service provider is going to be doing. And there's still no substitute for security awareness training and elevating the consciousness of the security, or I'd say the security culture of an organization, because there's still good old fashioned methods of hijacking credentials, lifting credentials that all of a sudden give somebody privileged access even to a SaaS-based platform. And I guess I'll just, an example, we talked to an organization that we recently performed some incident response for, and then moved to some of our managed security offerings. And, the organization was very quickly either moving to Azure or, they were leveraging SaaS-based applications for things like NetSuite, or credit card processing as an example. And the question was, hey, I'm moving to the cloud. I should be good, right? Moving forward, no more incidents, and you're more protected. But let's make sure we have training. Let's make sure we have policies and procedures in place and a program that covers even cloud computing as well. And then third party risk management. So I'm assuming you guys have a process for ensuring your partners, including CSPs, are secure. If you don't, certainly make that a focus as you move into 2022. You can lean on us. We'd be happy to help there. But dig in, right? What's the underlying security? Do they have a security operations center? Do they have tools and instrumentation? How's their data security? How do they prevent denial of service? What happens with incident response? Do they have an overarching system security program? What do they do from a patching and maintenance perspective? I promise you, I've seen UCaaS providers, patch and perform maintenance all over the board and with very little warning. And that puts some risk, right? It pushes that down to you guys and your organizations. What are the certs? The compliance piece, what occurs during a breach, the liability, right? I mean, is there indemnity if data is stolen? Performance and reliability through SLAs. So these are all things, and this is not an exhaustive list, that you really need to dig in, and there has to be a checklist so you can be very prescribed as you vet out various CSPs that are out there, so that you're not left holding a bag if there is a security incident down the road. And then just to kind of build on that, cloud and compliance regulation, there's different frameworks, certifications, whether it pertains to cloud or security, things like HIPAA and ISO and GDPR, or even if it's more operational controls, TOGAF, COBIT, ITIL. So again, making sure that your CSP that you're partnering with is all stitched up on this front and doing what you need them to do from a compliance and regulatory standpoint. James, anything there? You good?
No, I'm good.
Then just, I think we've hit on a lot of these already, but, a few others to note. So we talked about security. So shadow IT is an issue I'm sure you guys have been faced with, right? So it's very easy to acquire, implement, consume, applications now, especially in the SaaS-based model. And so, understanding what your risk is there, right? If somebody from sales goes in and implements a CRM platform on their own, right? Or somebody does that for HR or payroll. So just trying to figure out how decisions are made and if that's going to create problems for shadow IT for you and your IT team. Another thing that we see bypassed occasionally is the end user experience. So, hey, we're going to move a key application to the cloud that used to reside on-prem, and then that's done, and all of a sudden productivity falls off of a cliff because uptime, performance is dampened because of a move to the cloud. So really dig into what's that end user experience before you move and after, and hence the reason you probably want to do some POCs and testing and have a really solid rollback plan. And then few others to note. Cost reduction, cost containment is important. Don't get me wrong, but if that's the primary driver, that could become an issue, longer term, right? There's got to be a business case, a use case for making a move to cloud computing. There certainly are applications that aren't cloud friendly. We've seen that, and then lastly, I think having a poor connectivity strategy. So that wide area network, that ISP connection becomes critical. So having the right type of throughput, the right type of load balancing, the right type of failover, whether that's at headquarters, branch offices, for users that are remote, you name it. And at some point it may be better to pivot to those direct connections that we talked about. So James, anything else to add here?
Yeah, on the shadow IT piece, I kind of want to touch on that one a little bit. Is just as we talked about, like the SaaS providers and what you can, the benefits there. One of the concerns is if somebody has a credit card, they could easily subscribe to a service, right, and start consuming that service. And one of the biggest ones I've seen that just organizations need to be concerned with is really on the project management side. So somebody will subscribe to like a Kanban board or some type of project management board, and before you know it, data that you thought should only be housed within your organization is now outside of your organization and being published in data within that, right? So it's really easy for users to subscribe to those software as a service type tools, even internal IT, where or somebody that says, oh, I need a remote into this machine, and if the controls in the organization aren't great, I'm subscribing to a cloud platform that gives me remote access into my machine and maybe somebody else's, and they use a password, right, just for simplicity. And now you're opening up, right, security boundaries within your organization. Some of those, of course, can be stopped, based on certain controls from an or from a security perspective. But again, I mean, it's very easy for end users to subscribe to services and things like that that could impact the overall security of your environment. So.
Yeah, thanks, James. Back to that. You know, the use case that we have for you is investment bank, COVID first, work from home, work from anywhere strategy. Initially, there was an attempt to try to maintain, you know, servers, systems at HQ. The user experience we talked about a little bit ago suffered, which created some real friction and consternation within the employee base that was highly regarded, highly valued. And so, you know, the underlying on-prem environment simply couldn't support what was trying, you know, to be done. So, you know, move to Azure, East and Central, you know, different availability zones, right? So that built-in business continuity and DR, you know, also moved to SaaS and took the opportunity, you know, to move to this cloud first, cloud only, you know, strategy. And then, you know, once that was done, and most of the heavy lifting is, you know, this user experience now is ubiquitous, right? So if I'm, you know, at a cafe, you know, working away, or, you know, if I'm, you know, I'm in the office, if I'm at home, you know, the idea for them was, let's harness the power of the cloud to make that a consistent and reliable experience. So I like that as a use case. And then, you know, the last thing, and we'll just, you know, pause and see if there's any questions. We always come back to the IT maturity model, right? And mentioned it, you know, earlier. Cloud done right will allow an IT organization to become an IT as a service partner within the organization, and then as we move up, you know, even a strategic business partner. And we've given examples of companies that were not technically inclined or oriented in the past. They've transformed and have become technology companies. You know, like banks and real estate firms and pizza chains. And so, you know, leveraging the cloud has enabled that to happen, and for them to completely transform how they go to market, how they, you know, retain employees, how they delight customers, et cetera. And so it all comes back to making an organization more mature with their IT model. So James, I know this is your baby. Any closing remarks before we see if there's questions?
Yeah, just a couple of things. So when we start looking, like we were talking about cloud providers, or even like a managed service providers, cloud providers, and things like that, that's really where you start making the shift to be more proactive. As Matt talked about, like IT as a service and IT as a strategic business partner, and that's really where I would say your whole DevSecOps comment comes into play, where you have your development, your security, and your ops team that's really starting to blend together. Because in reality, security, they are not silos anymore. They're interwoven, and they're really interwoven throughout the whole organization. So anything that you do, from how you deliver something or handle data, yours internally or your clients, there's a security aspect of that, there's an operational aspect of that, and there's most likely a development aspect of how it's, you know, how it's delivered, how it's secured, and how it's stored, right? So when you start to think from that perspective and moving up the overall IT maturity model, that's really when you start to get the value. And Matt's comment of, you know, most people aren't IT companies. You know, that these clients are taking advantage of IT and cloud and these type of things, and really, and like I said, kind of weaving it into the company, they're starting to realize they can do a lot more. They can provide a lot better service to their client more efficiently as well, and stay competitive within the market as well. But one is you have to understand what the maturity model looks like for you and what you're trying to achieve. Because if there is not a roadmap or a plan, definitely there's significant risk. So.
Yes, well said. So Bethany, excuse me, do we have any questions?
So I'm not seeing any questions come in at this time, Matt. We did actually get a comment from one of our attendees just giving you both kudos on the content today. Really nicely done, really well presented, and they're just saying that they'll be reusing this to show to their management. So, with that in mind, if you like this content, this has been helpful, let us know, and definitely use the recording that we share afterwards with whoever you need to get this conversation going.
Yeah, we love that comment and that feedback. So thank you. And Bethany's gonna and the marketing team's gonna share the content so you can replay James's comments to your heart content.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Bethany, back over to you, but thanks everyone for attending. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day.
Yeah, thank you guys. And actually, before we wrap up, Matt, we just got a question come in. The question is, can you give some elements of a sound rollback plan?
Yeah. So James, I'll defer to you, and then I've definitely got some comments here. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it really kind of a broad question, but I'll answer it this way. So if you're already in the cloud, really, from that perspective, from what I would say a rollback plan, or I'm assuming kind of a DR plan, or business continuity plan. Really, from a cloud perspective, a sound plan is really taking advantage of the automation that's in the cloud to be able to roll back. And the big thing to take in consideration is the automation around the data. It really is the automation around the data that you have, the application that you have, and then how it's actually delivered. So if you're looking at a rollback plan, it's not just like, can I restore this data? It's really, how do I restore the user experience and then walk your way back? So really what you're trying to do with anything, at least my perspective, is roll back the user experience. So what are those components that feed into that user experience? One, web. Two could be data. And then what are we doing to secure those, and what are we doing to roll those back? What automations could be put in place? And then how do we lock that data so the data can actually be rolled back? So that's just a kind of high level. There's multiple scenarios if we're talking about on-prem or cloud, or if it's a platform or SaaS, but just at a high level, that's kind of would be my answer there from a technical perspective.
Yeah, and I'll just say, and then we'll close out on this. Accounting platforms in the past have been notoriously finicky when moving to the cloud, and we've seen organizations kind of cut the cord from their on-prem accounting application, as an example, move to the cloud. The performance has been so impactful that an organization hasn't been able to close out their month, their quarter, or their year, and there's no fail safe, right? So making sure that you're running maybe even in parallel and tiptoeing into the cloud, so that if you experience issues, and again, to James's point, it's always unique, the scenario, but just making sure you have a safety net if things go awry and you need to continue to function using a core application, just as an example. So we can get into that. Feel free to hit us up, your account manager up, and we'll talk more about it. But thanks to all of you again, and hope to see you guys on a webinar soon.
Yes. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, James. Thank you both for your time, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Just a quick reminder, we will send the recording out later this afternoon, and it'll also be posted on our YouTube channel. And if you'd like to attend any of our other webinars or roundtables, we'll have a plan going into 2022 and look forward to seeing you there. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
See you.